Welcome to another explainer. Today, we're going to absolutely demystify the mechanical systems running your daily behaviors. If you've ever stopped and wondered why you do the things you do, especially those things you really wish you didn't do, well, you are exactly in the right place. We're going to look right under the hood of your mind and break down the exact anatomy of a habit.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's what we'll be covering today. We're going to start with the science of autopilot, decode the actual habit loop, and uncover the immense power of cravings. Then we'll arm you with a highly structured toolkit for building habits that actually stick, along with a foolproof framework for breaking those bad habits forever. Basically, we're taking the hard science and turning it straight into practical solutions you can use today.
Section 1. The science of autopilot and how your brain saves energy.
To really grasp this, we've got to validate something super important right off the bat. Your habits are neurological processes. They are not moral failings. Just think about this number, 45%. According to researchers, nearly half of our daily actions are spent on total autopilot. I mean, wow. Almost half of your day is literally not driven by conscious choice, but by these deep-seated habits just running quietly in the background.
Which brings up a pretty intense question. Who is actually driving your life? If nearly half of your day is completely automated, well, the quality of those automated routines is essentially dictating your health, your wealth, your happiness, and your overall success.
To figure out who's driving, we have to look at a specific part of the brain called the basal ganglia. This little area is responsible for developing our routines. You can think of it like your brain's biological energy-saving mode. Because, honestly, if our brains had to consciously process every single decision, like exactly how to loop the laces to tie our shoes, or every single turn on the drive to work, they would go into absolute overdrive. So, the basal ganglia takes over those repeated actions, letting your brain stop making conscious decisions so it can save that precious energy.
Section 2, decoding the habit loop and the core machinery of behavior. Now that we know exactly why the brain craves this energy-saving consistency, let's break down the actual mechanics of how a habit operates. And this brilliantly illustrates what's known as Charles Duhigg's classic three-step habit loop, because every single habit follows this exact formula. First, there's a cue, which is your trigger. Second, there's the routine, which is the behavior itself. And third, there's a reward. That reward gives your brain a little hit of satisfaction and basically says, hey, that was great, let's definitely remember to do this again.
So what actually triggers that loop? Well, according to the data, almost all cues fall into one of these 5 buckets. It could be a specific location, like smelling the coffee pot the second you walk past the break room. It could be the time of day, like the clock hits 3 p.m. and you suddenly need a snack. It could be an emotional state, like feeling anxious. It could be the people around you. Or it could just be your immediately preceding action, like the physical act of turning off your morning alarm automatically triggering you to toss on your running shoes.
Now, what's really interesting here is how the exact same cue can result in wildly different outcomes, depending entirely on your programming. Take the emotional cue of feeling stressed. For one person, the routine triggered by stress is taking a brisk, healthy walk. But for another person, that exact same stress triggers the routine of anxiously biting their nails. The trigger is literally identical, but the automated code running the routine is completely different. Section 3. The power of cravings and why we actually take action.
So we have the basic loop, right? But there's a missing psychological link here that truly explains why we are motivated to respond to those cues in the first place. Enter James Clear's 4-step refinement. He takes that basic loop and injects craving right between the cue and the response. Cravings are the actual motivational force behind every single habit. Without desiring a change in your internal state, you really have no reason to act. You don't actually crave turning on the television, you crave the feeling of being entertained.
Let's ground this theory in a real-world scenario. Say you're on a walk and you suddenly smell a donut shop. That's your cue. It immediately triggers a craving for a sugar rush. Now, these first 2 steps form what we call the problem phase. You suddenly have a desire that needs satisfying, so you move right into the solution phase. Your response is to go buy that donut, and your reward is eating it. That perfectly satisfies the craving and effectively wires your brain to do the exact same thing next time you walk down that street.
Section 4. Building habits that stick. Your ultimate toolkit.
All right, enough theory. It's time to get actionable. How do we actually manipulate these psychological levers to rewrite our own code? Well, there is an ultimate matrix for building any new habit, and it works by aligning these 4 laws. You make the cue obvious. You make the craving attractive. You make the response incredibly easy. And you make the reward satisfying. So the crucial point is, when you align these 4 levers, adopting a new, healthy routine becomes almost completely effortless. Let's talk a bit more about that 4th law, making it satisfying. Stanford academic B.J. Fogg makes a brilliant observation about the emotional component of rewards. He points out that athletes celebrate their tiny successes, and they do it immediately. Here's the thing. Our brains are actually really bad at distinguishing between feeling awesome about a massive achievement and feeling awesome about a tiny one. The hack here is to actively leverage those tiny thrills to build serious momentum. Which perfectly leads into Fogg's concept of tiny habits. If you want to guarantee success, do not punish yourself with giant, overwhelming goals. Make the action ridiculously easy. You want to start flossing? Okay, start by flossing just one tooth. Literally, just one single tooth. Then, celebrate immediately. Smile in the mirror, give yourself a thumbs up, whatever works. By making the start completely frictionless and the reward immediate, you completely remove willpower from the equation.
Section 5. Breaking bad habits forever and dismantling the loop.
Okay, so we know how to build the good ones, but how do we dismantle the destructive behaviors that are holding us back? You simply invert the matrix. It's perfectly symmetrical. To starve a bad habit of its power, you just do the exact opposite. You make the cue invisible. You make the craving unattractive. You make the response difficult. And you make the reward unsatisfying. If you cut off the oxygen at these 4 points, the bad habit literally cannot survive.
Let's see how this builds into a highly specific, real-world case study. We're going to call this one the lonely texter. Say you find yourself repeatedly texting an ex. Why? Well, the cue is feeling stressed or lonely. The routine is sending that text. And the reward is a quick, temporary hit of emotional support. The fix here isn't just telling yourself to try harder not to text. The real fix is diagnosing the true craving, which is emotional connection, and finding a brand new, healthy source to satisfy it, like calling a good friend instead.
Let's look at another classic, the snooze button. The cue is that 6 a.m. alarm going off in a freezing cold room. The routine is smashing the snooze button, and the reward is delaying the terrible chore of getting out of bed to make coffee. So how do you break this? Smart environment design. You defeat the cue by pre-programming your coffee pot the night before. Suddenly, the reward of hot, ready coffee outweighs the cold room, and that bad habit is bypassed completely.
As you start pulling these levers and tweaking your environment, please keep this timeline in mind. Rewiring your basal ganglia takes actual time. Science shows it takes about 21 days to form a basic new habit, 66 days for that behavior to become deeply automatic, and about 3 months to truly solidify a long-term lifestyle change. So, be patient with yourself. Accept slow, consistent progression over hoping for overnight miracles.
Which leaves us with one final thought to close out this explainer. You now have the mechanical toolkit to completely dismantle and rebuild the 45% of your life that runs on autopilot. You know the loops, you know the cues, and you know the laws. So I leave you with this. What is one ridiculously tiny habit you can change today to start rewriting your code?